Hello, BookTube. I've been participating in a video concept that was created by David Wiley over on his channel, the Bookshelf Essentials, where you pull down a book from your shelves that isn't like most of the others, a book that you're really glad you have, that you really don't want to ever get rid of, and chat about it a bit. And every time I've made one of those videos, I've made 3 or 4 of them now, every time I make one of those videos, I mention that in addition to having that particular category of book, I think all book people do, I also tend to segregate mine. I tend to put them in this little book room and not just spread them out all over. There are books that I like all throughout Hyde Cottage, but the ones that I really, really love, the ones that feel essential, tend to migrate their way into this room, if only, even if I don't know at first, if only because I find myself going to them repeatedly, which is kind of one of my yardsticks of being an essential book. And I guess I made that mention one too many times because a number of you have been emailing me saying, well, if every book in that room is a bookshelf essential, what about a bookshelf tour? what about taking us through every book in that room? I've done that a number of times, but the books in this room have changed quite a bit. You'd think after what I just said they wouldn't, and they change slower than the rest of the place. But nevertheless, I have been engaged for the last 6-7 months in a rigorous attack upon my print and paper book collection, a rigorous rethinking of what's here and what's taking up space. And as a result, well, you can't see it in this camera angle, but this room has 3 large, completely empty bookcases. And there's plenty of room on these shelves. So I don't know that a room tour, I don't think, would work because there's a huge number of empty shelves that are going to be filled. The point isn't just to leave them there as a pretty thing. The point is to fill them. But I can certainly do one shelf. Now can't I? So I thought it would do that today for a bookshelf essential, a bookshelf tour of essentials. So I cleared pillows away from a shelf, and we'll do the Transwise books first, just like we do in ordinary bookshelf tours, and then we'll move on from there. So there are 2 books on top of here. One is the Bones Classical Library, which we saw just recently on this channel for Juvenal, the works of Juvenal. This is the works of Horace. Same deal, same look here, the same intangliated, embossed look to these volumes. Same printing of the library at the bottom there, the onion skin paper, and the same very idealized portrait of the figure involved. This volume is translated literally into English prose by C. Smart of Pembroke College, Cambridge. And it has the same feature that I value in all the Bones classical libraries, which is an enormous amount of annotation. There's annotation all throughout here. It's sometimes half or even 2/3 of every page. And those are endless to me. The amount of erudition in those notes is just endless to me. I don't actually go to the Bones Classical Library for the translation. I think it's pretty clear, no matter what they say, or said, 150 years ago, that the translations are meant as trots. They're not meant to show anything of the spirit, the animating spirit of the original. They're just not. So they're meant for students. They're meant to help students with as close as possible to a word-by-word translation. So I really come to these for the annotations, and that's why I have this one. Of one of my favorite authors of all time. Then we have, okay, this thing has seen better work. This has seen better days. This is the John Morley translation of English Men of Letters. Oh, not translation. He did a series of books. John Morley, 120, 130 years ago, he did a series of books called The English Men of Letters. And each volume profiled a famous writer in English history. I have the spine there. I do not have the cover. This does not have covers on it. God only knows this. I don't remember the story of how this came to me. God only knows what shape it was in. It's perfectly readable, though. I've read it a couple of times. Morley did not write all these volumes himself. He did the series, but then he commissioned each volume. And this volume is on Philip Sidney, and it's by J.A. Symonds, who's an author I really, really like. And here's a volume on Philip Sidney. I have a whole bunch of books on Sidney. I find him biographically very interesting. So glad to have that little volume. Then we'll move on to the shelf itself. These are tightly packed. Well, they're not particularly usefully packed now, but then none of these books are at the moment. This room is in a state of upheaval. It's a slow state of upheaval, but it's in a state of change. The kind of change that almost never comes to the little book room. As I move things around and reconsider things and whatnot. But this is a little paperback that I've shown you before. This is by Faden Press. This is the art book. Squat little square paperback that is just one painting or sculpture from one artist on one page. You get a description of the artist, you get the location of the painting, and you get a little bit about a description of the piece of artwork itself. So in that, there's Fragonard. And in that sense, it's the same as many other art books that you would get. The thing I love, this was hugely successful for Faden. Oh my God. They just, for a solid 15 years, they could not sell enough copies of this book. In the little paperback, and also in the larger hardcover. There's an oversized, typical dimension art book hardcover that I never see in the wild. I wish I could. That is a big hardcover I would actually get. But the thing that I love about this is that, as you can sort of see suggested by the different type fonts on the cover all jumbled together, is that everything here is in alphabetical order. So you're not going school by school, period by period. And so nothing in here is predictable. You will get juxtapositions that no one ever envisioned, that are just created by the alphabet. I love it. Go back to it all the time. Except lately, except these days. Okay, then we have a very old volume. This is inscribed in 1934, but this is going to be older than that. What is this here? Yeah, this is older than that. And it's very similar to the Bonn Classical Library, only this is Torquato Tasso. This is Jerusalem Delivered, his epic poem. This is an unabridged translation with illustrations of his epic poem. I don't find Tasso all that readable. I find him very interesting, but he suffers in comparison with other great Renaissance epic poems, some of which are very good to read. Which, let's all keep in mind, is the whole point of writing. So if you're not that, and I don't know if it's, I'm hesitant to say that it's the translator, because Tasso in the original does not read at all easily. It is a slog. But this is an older volume, and I tell myself that this is all done in English by J.H. Whiffen. And I tell myself that what I really like about this thing is that there's a long potted biography of Tasso at the beginning. The only thing in the book that isn't a translation. There's a whole potted biography of Tasso and his times at the beginning. You don't find all that much about Tasso for popular publication anymore. So I tell myself that's the reason I like this book, but look at the print size. I'm almost at the age of 28, I'm almost at the point where I would need a magnifying glass to read that. And it goes on for page after page after page. So I don't know. This volume, this old translation of Tasso, is a perfect example of the kind of upheaval that's happening in this room. Because this volume, I don't know if this is the translation that's on Project Gutenberg. Probably it's not. I don't know if there's an electronic version of this at all. But this volume, I mean, the print for the verses is not much better than the print of the introduction, which means that every time I see the book and think about it, I decide against it. My hand roves somewhere else on the shelf, and I should not have books like that. Their type font size isn't going to get any better overnight. No matter how interested I am in them, I should not have them if I cannot use them comfortably. If I'm not willing to use them, if my hand goes down the shelf and I think I'd have to squint for 2 hours, then as nice and pretty as this volume is, it should go. But anyway, let's see if we can do better than. Oh, okay, all right. We have an indie press book next. This is M.J. Pearson. She wrote a historical gay romance. Got to have something for the gays. This is set in the Victorian era, and is realistically done. The two main characters love each other, but they recognize that that's a sentence to prison or death in the world where they live. And there's none of the usual indie press fudging of that to make a kind of silly fairy tale. Instead, they have to deal with that and are always worried that someone they know who claims to like them is going to turn them into the police. In addition to that, they have to deal with a bad guy, as you can tell from this rather aces cover. Only one man can save him. This cover is by Sean Platter, very talented artist, and I liked it. I liked it enough for it to be in this room. Then we have a Da Capo trade paperback of the usual one-volume abridgment of The Stones of Venice by John Ruskin. This is a masterpiece, but again, this is a good example, not as good as the Tasso, because this can be read, but it's a good example of the rethinking that's been going on even with my bookshelf essentials in this room. I love Ruskin. I love his work. I would really like a different version of The Stones of Venice, something that's 5 times this long, a gigantic phone book of a book, and with a lot better illustrations. I don't think this is illustrated at all. And Ruskin, yeah, okay, well, you've got dental work there, but I'd want. There is. I don't expect people to know who John Ruskin is, but trust me, there is a far better version of this that could be made. A far bigger and more elaborate thing. There's no use in the 1990s or whenever this came out. There's no use in saying, well, if we make Ruskin this size, then he won't be so intimidating. He's intimidating anyway, and no one wants to read him other than fans who already know him. So give them a phone book. give people like me a volume of Ruskin that they'll really want, as opposed to this is probably a stopgap measure. I think it's pretty. I like the look of it, but I could easily see replacing it, easily, either with a no holds barred ebook, an ebook that was really good and that did the job that all ebooks should do, or with a big trade paperback of some kind. Okay. Then we have the writer John Gardner. Those of you who were assigned his little book Grendel in school will know this author. He also wrote a couple of books on writing, on prose, on being a novelist and whatnot. His voice when doing this kind of writing is wonderful. Strongly recommended. All right. Then we have Edith Hamilton, the author of Mythology, which is in this room in a couple of different versions. She wrote a ton of books. She wrote books for her whole life, and I love them. I love her very genial, accessible classicist approach to everything that she wrote about. And she was also a passionate reader. There's none of, for instance, this has the kind of scholarly clinical detachment that is was once upon a time very popular, and she scorned that in everything that she wrote. So as a result, lots of people over the decades have referred to her work as parochial, a little bit innocent. I don't see that. I see a very sharp, very good critic. And I have Mythology, but 2 of her books that I also love are The Roman Way, where she looks at a whole bunch of Roman writers, including Juvenal and Horace, and The Greek Way, where she does the same for Greek authors. And I found this volume that has both of them in it, The Greek Way and The Roman Way. And that's great. I'd never seen this before in the wild. So that's here. That's a good, solid heaping of Edith. Oh, okay, great. All right, this next one is a big anthology volume. It really doesn't belong here. I have a shelf for this kind of anthology volume. It really belongs up there. I'll have to move it around. But this is edited by Leslie Shepard, and this is The Book of Dracula. Just a big anthology. These kinds of publishing reprint houses just did this sort of thing, and it worked really well. This is a really good anthology. We've got everything that you might expect here. Sheridan Le Fanu, Guy de Maupassant, F. Marion Crawford, E.F. Benson, Algernon Blackwood, Bram Stoker's Dracula's Guest, of course, is in here, and a whole bunch of others. Just a classic vampire novel, a vampire anthology. I just think it's wonderful. There are only a couple of vampire... Let's see, let's get it back down in here. Let's just put it here for now. There are only a couple of vampire anthologies that are anywhere near as good as this one. All right, speak of the devil. This is one of those. This is... The Vampire Archives, edited by the great Otto Penzler. And this is a huge floppy trade paperback. Again, this should not be here. I have all of these in one particular place, and this isn't it. But this is perhaps the greatest vampire anthology volume of them all. It's probably is. It's just incredible. It has everybody. just everybody. I'm sure that, now that I think about it, that Dracula's Guest is in here as well. Yes, probably. I mean, that's the thing that you reprint if you're doing a volume like this. You're going to have Bram Stoker in here, of course. Oh, this has just everybody. Oh, my God, just everybody. Byron, Keats, Charles Beaumont. E.F. Benson is in here a couple of times. M.R. James is in here. Manly Maid Wellman is in here. Yeah, Dracula's Guest is in here. That's going to be in every one of these anthologies. What it's doing here, I don't know. Okay, great. Then we have a graphic novel. This is one of the rare instances of a graphic novel. It's not about superheroes that I love, and that may, in fact, be about superheroes. This is by Jonathan Feder-Vorm. This came out, I think the sheet is still in here. Yeah, it is. This came out in 2019, and I praised it to you then. The minute I got it and read it, I fell in love with it. I absolutely love it. I go back to it often because it is jam-packed. And this is called Moonbound. It's all about Apollo 11. It's all about the mankind's trip to the moon. The long forbearing of it, the engineering of it. One of the neat things about this, one of the many neat things about this and this graphic novel is that it gets into the technicalities. Let me show you an example of what I mean. The narrative will often just stop in order to give technicalities, in order to make a technical page, so that because the author knows that he has a lot of science to cover, and wants to do that. Wants to make sure that see here. Sorry about the pause here. You get stuff like this, where you think the science is being explained to you in the course of telling an incredibly heroic story. There's even the sequence where the astronauts land on the moon is interspersed with really well done visuals of how crappy television was, of how crappy television was back when that happened. Let me get to that section. It intersperses with the so-called present time, where the struggle with astronauts and whatnot, with historical time, and does a wonderful job of it. Every historical character connected even remotely with the space race enters in here. Everybody from Kennedy to Werner von Braun, everybody. Let me get, I want to find, yeah, here we go. There you have Mission Control, and there is the incredibly blurry television footage, all the televisions in the shop window. I don't know how many of you watched that broadcast when it was done. It was incredible, absolutely incredible, to watch a human being walk on the moon. It's just straight out of science fiction. And this just covers all of it. Just does a wonderful job. I'm pretty sure that this thing is still in print, and we're coming up on gift-giving holidays. Ooh, God. If you are a space junkie, a NASA junkie, or if you know someone who is, or if you know a young person who's starting to be, oh, get them this. Absolutely get them this. Because this is amazing. It's just incredible. The color schemes, the background color schemes actually do have a rationale behind them. As we learn about the men and the suits and the science behind it, there's even a fairly nice digression about a figure in the history of this long story that I find utterly fascinating. I wish he had a new biography in English. His name was Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. He was a weird Russian scientist who saw space and other worlds and rockets with an incredible clarity decades before anyone else did. Tsiolkovsky was weird and strange, and he has shown up in a number of science fiction stuff. But I want a big, really good biography of him. There must be a huge amount of material that an enterprising scholar could get or get access to. Russia is not all that amenable to the West right now, but I doubt they're going to care about records of Tsiolkovsky. I doubt very much that they would. And what a story. Oh my, what a story. He, like I said, he pops up in pop culture from time to time, but I wish he got a whole book of his own. He gets a couple of pages in here that I really like. And then the last book on this shelf is huge. Oh, okay. Yes, it's huge for a reason. This is the Royal Shakespeare Society complete works of Shakespeare. Big, huge thing in hardcover. I had this in trade paperback that I think one of you sent me. I think one of you sent me the trade paperback of this. Or maybe you sent me the paperback of the Pelican Complete Shakespeare. Anyway, whatever it was, I got it, I loved it, and I got rid of it. I mailed it away. Somebody who really wanted a Complete Shakespeare and didn't have the money and didn't have a bookstore and didn't trust online, etc., etc. This thing I go to often. I've got stuff stuck inside it. It's not, as you might remember, it's not my absolute favorite one-volume Shakespeare. My absolute favorite one-volume Shakespeare, though, doesn't have a 50th of the scholarship in this thing. This has introductions to every work, a general introduction, lots and lots of appendices, tons of footnotes on every play and every poem. Just it's a wonderful, wonderful volume. I often lose myself in it. It's almost as good as the Big Riverside Shakespeare. That's also in this room. I don't know how many collected Shakespeares are in this room. But that's it. So there you go. This time around, we have not just a bookshelf essential, but a whole bookshelf of essentials. This is totally subject to change. Even this one shelf is totally subject to change. I'm seeing weaknesses in this shelf just with, 10 books. That's the kind of thinking I've been doing about books just in general here at Hyde Cottage, and it's making for significant changes. Maybe when all the dust settles, if it ever does, I will do a room tour. We'll start at one end and go all the way around the room dealing with every single book. That would probably take a year. But anyway, this has gone on long enough. That is a few more bookshelf essentials for you. I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.